Alright, we're going to do a little test run here. Just testing out the audio on the Blue Yeti microphone. Seeing how it syncs up with the background audio, because I want to do some ranting. So, recently on GitHub, someone pretending to be me, but not doing a very good job, decided to push, or attempt to push, malicious code commits to arbitrary repositories. They created GitHub username that was evildojo666, which, if I were smart, I would have registered that myself a long time ago, but I had not yet come up with Evil Dojo as a name in 2011 or so when I actually created my GitHub profile. It was not until 2013 that I would actually register evildojo.com, and not until recently that my Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube would all be Evil Dojo 666. Naturally, I think it makes a lot of sense to have unified handles across different services when possible, right? Standard internet operating procedure. However, I did not do this in this case. My GitHub profile is actually Mike Desu, right? This is because prior to Evil Dojo, I was thinking of naming my shit Zen Gaming Dojo, and Mike Desu naturally was the sensei. It was actually the first username that I actually ever had on IRC was, in fact, sensei. And many of my oldest internet friends can confirm this. So, where am I going with that? Obviously, I didn't do this shit, right? I don't have the fucking time, nor give a shit, nor am I that fucking noob to do such a fucking terrible job. Especially when we have, like, the actual fucking, like, case study of the recent XZ exploit, right? Like, I haven't even thoroughly gone through that shit, and, like, even then, like, there's been so many other, like, backdoor attempts worth studying to, like, take me several years to actually get, like, really fucking locked in on, right? Like, I have a lot of experience, but, like, I don't have a lot of experience doing that shit, and for good reason, because nobody's ever paid me to do it. And I know that to do a good job, I would have to spend a lot of time, right? A lot of time. And this person did not spend a lot of time. In fact, the repository that they uploaded, I'm pretty sure their screenshots, was like, one, it was recently created. Two, they legitimately just like cloned all of my repos. Like, they must have ripped all of my repos and then like re-uploaded them, right? They mostly had the same thing in their profile as I do. They made so many little attempts at like just jabbing at me from a distance, and for this reason I feel like I have an idea of who it might be. There's a certain class of individuals who've been fucking with me over the years, unfortunately, and I'm not going to name them, but they know who they are. So that's the only acknowledgement that I want to give, because I strongly believe to kill a troll, you simply have to ignore it. Because I see that happening across the board. Like, a lot of really successful people who deal with individuals in this manner go on to great things. And while I don't really care about fame in this context, like, I'm certainly not trying to blow up from some fucking skid trying to tarnish my name, right? Like, I've been in the programming game a long time, and while I haven't really, like, fully built anything sufficient to, like, generate profit or, like, really make a strong name for myself, although I have put a few things out there, I'm not in it for the fame, I'm not in it for the money, although I have managed to scrape up a living doing so. I'm in it because I love to fucking code, and I love to hack, and I love to write shit, and I love to figure problems out. And if someone were to task me with backdooring any single GitHub repository, right? Like, let's think this through. Like, if I'm actually Evil Dojo right now, the whole point being I'm a good guy, but I like to think like a bad one, then what would it take to actually successfully achieve a backdoor, right? Well, even completely outside of the technical aspect, for whatever way that you... Because, you know, the universe of malicious code is pretty big, right? So you can think that, like, for any given arbitrary GitHub repository, you would have to first infiltrate yourself into the developers of that repository successfully. So you'd have to demonstrate a track record of being, like, a good contributor, right? You'd have to worm your way, you'd have to become one of the bros, you'd have to become one of the people actually contributing to the project over time. You have to become so entrenched that not only are your commits not questioned, or, you know, like, very little question, or you have so much power or control over the repository to begin with that your commits aren't even looked at, like, very hardly. But even if someone was looking at it, right, like, even if you had one person looking at your code that you were committing, how would you deceive that reviewer, right? Well, you'd have to go a step further, at least, than simply fucking converting the payload into decimal numbers and then storing that in a list and then, like, executing that, right? If I were, like, actually going to try and get a malicious repo, or, like, a malicious code committed to a repo, I would want to at least do far more than just one level deep, right? You want to make it difficult to deobfuscate. And this person didn't make it difficult to deobfuscate. They made it incredibly fucking easy because they were trying to embarrass me. And it was so plainly obvious that anybody else could see that without me having to defend myself. So I just feel really bad for that person. Whoever it is, whatever group of people, if it's just one person or a group of people, fuck you, suck my dick. We're gonna keep going. So I also want to give a shout out to the wonderful community of researchers who managed to catch this bad actor. I'm very sorry that all of y'all have been involved, but shout outs to all my IRC crew, because I'm pretty sure that this is where the drama initiated. Someone doesn't like me for one reason or another, right? all I've ever done is just be myself and be open and honest about everything it is that I've got going on and who it is that I am. So some people, I guess, hate themselves so much that they can't stand to see someone like myself actually thriving or attempting to thrive. You know, they want to put their thumb in the press and try to mush and mangle and, you know, shuck your jive and just fuck you up in all sorts of ways, right? Well, shoutouts to the IRC crew, because for all of those of you who have said to not ignore or to not, like, you know, announce your ignores or whatever, obviously something good can come out of it. I haven't seen this much internet attention since people okay with murdering Assange, as well as my days of Stepmania with my One Winged Angel track. Those are the two previous times I've kind of blown up online. But at least, you know, like those times I was kind of trying. Actually never really intended to blow up with people okay, because that was more like something I realized I could do in the moment really quickly, and it just happened to kind of pop off. That wasn't really the intention or the goal, but it did, and I was really excited because I realized just how easily or quickly someone could achieve, like, success in general in the tech world. Like, literally overnight, I ended up on the front page of Reddit for that shit. That was a long time ago, too. That was like 2011, 2010, late 2010. Just as I was getting started as a web developer. I had been building websites before, but I wasn't getting paid to do it until around then. I got picked up by a small team in Amelia Island, Florida, and that company no longer exists. They dissolved or got bought up by a company in Jacksonville. So, like, you know, I started fucking, you know, around with HTML when I was like 11 years old. Not long after I started playing with QBasic on an MS-DOS machine. And especially as a kid, this was like the game for me, right? Super Mario came first, but Doom was like the next biggest, really big, like, well, next to Chrono Trigger, right? Like next to Final Fantasy stuff. Like especially in the FPS genre. While I knew about Wolfenstein, I kind of played it a bit. The Super Nintendo port was okay. It wouldn't be until much later that I had a machine actually smooth enough to play like Doom like this. And even then, I didn't have like a gamepad on the computer. So in other words, you know, what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that a lot of what I've been successful at, I haven't really been trying. Or I haven't had to try. I mean, obviously you're gonna, like, encounter problems along the way, especially when you're, like, doing something technical. But, like, you eventually learn to smooth out those problems in such a way that things are, like, way more clear, and they're not as much of a cognitive load to, like, actually process through. if it's your first time building something and you've never done it before, obviously you're going to have some stuff to work through. And everyone's going to come to a conclusion or solution or really get it at different rates. All relative to your experience level, all relative to your biology, all relative to your cognitive state. There's so many different factors, right? Not one person's going to learn how to program at the same rate as everyone else. Where was I going with that? You know, what's funniest about this whole situation is that I've gotten a lot of like free publicity as a result. Over 1 million people have viewed the initial post. Tens of thousands have viewed retweets. It's even gotten shared by my local developer community here in town. Literally came full circle. I would not be here if not for games like Doom. Because it wouldn't have gotten into tech to begin with if not for games like Doom. Right? So shoutouts to dudes like John Carmack. As a child, I was very much wanting the direction to learn how to do this stuff way sooner. And I think my family kind of fucked me up a bit by overhyping my technical skills way before I had actually really developed them. And I'm sure this is a common problem when parents are just like really excited about their kids or whatever, but it really kind of puts a lot of unfair expectation onto people. And I think I would have come to things a lot sooner if I hadn't been required to do things in school that like ultimately made me, quote, a more rounded person, right? Like if I had been given more time with the machine and had more direction to like pick stuff up sooner, because like a lot of like, for instance, graphics jargon, the concept of like thinking in terms of frame draws or scenes or these graphics drawing calls and thinking in terms of drawing pixels and placing sprites on the screen and like a lot of stuff in programming growing up, like I didn't know that that's what I needed to know, and the teachers who taught me in school did not teach us how to draw shit or to, like how to like load an image file and then draw it on the screen, or how to like create a window and then draw to that window, right? Like a lot of that shit was straight up missing from my vocabulary up until maybe 10 years ago or so, 20 years ago. No, 10 years ago, 12 years, 13 years ago. Which is probably why a lot of my own game design ideas and concepts and, you know, my big desire to like work with stuff like dungeon crawlers and whatnot. I think that's because I think very textually, if that makes sense. Like even right now as I'm talking. Very procedural. And this is probably a function of like me being kind of this pseudo left-hander, right? And I say pseudo left-hander because technically speaking I was actually born a right-hander, but I had to learn how to become left-handed. Very quickly. As while my brain was wired to want to use this guy. So at birth, it was like this, right? And then they did surgery, and I've been able to open it that far. That's about it. I got forward and back wrist movement, and pretty much that's it. Like shit's fucking locked in lots of different ways. Lefty, on the other hand, he's all good. He's got everything going for him. So, within the first 6 weeks of my life, supposedly, I stopped trying to grab things with my right hand, and I began doing things very much with my left. And I didn't really understand the concept of balance until sufficient experiments with psychedelics that during my trips and my experiences, I felt in my brain, which came out of my body, and this is why I try to practice consciously using the right side of my body when possible. And I say when possible because it's not always possible. There's a lot of limitations that I work with on a day-to-day basis. But during those trips, I felt my consciousness move into the right side of my brain. And I greatly believe that this definitely impacts like how people process information. I don't believe people are purely like 100% left-hand or right-hand, so much as just like with consciousness and spectrums in general. I believe handedness is a spectrum. I believe that people are percent handed. I think that's a good note to leave on. But, every so often I like to sit down to Doom and unwind. I don't play a lot of new Doom content very often because I'm very intimidated by it. But I suppose that if people enjoy watching me play Doom, that some of my future videos could include some of this new Doom stuff that they got. Thanks for listening. Take it easy.